Hello students, welcome to my class on systemic mycosis. We will be dealing with 4 infections which can cause systemic mycosis. As I told you during my introduction class, you all should understand that while dealing with systemic mycosis, we are talking of fungi which can cause infections at two different sites. The primary site of infection is usually seen in the lungs because most of the infections are acquired by inhalation of the spores, and from there the infection spreads to the secondary sites by going through or by disseminating through the hematogenous route or through the lymphatic route. Most of the mycosis or most of the fungi causing systemic mycosis usually exist as dimorphic fungi. That means they are seen as yeast at 37 degrees Celsius or in vivo, and they grow as molds at 28 degrees Celsius or in vitro. Another very important fact that we need to note regarding the dimorphic fungi and their processing is that most of the fungi, we should not be performing the slide culture. In fact, for all of the dimorphic fungi, slide culture should not be performed to visualize the complete morphology because of the fact that they are primarily known to be pathogenic and must be handled with caution. For laboratory safety, all these isolates suspected to be dimorphic fungi should be grown on slants rather than on Petri plates. Their identifying characteristics are usually observable on well-prepared wet preparations. So, with this brief introduction, let us now deal with the dimorphic fungal organisms causing systemic mycosis. So, the first group of infection or the first infection of the dimorphic fungi is called as histoplasmosis. Now, histoplasmosis was an infection that was initially discovered by Samuel Taylor Darling, and therefore this infection is also called as the Darling's disease. As the name itself suggests, histoplasmosis, this means that this infection predominantly resides within the histiocytes. So, histo means histiocytes. They predominantly resides within the histiocytes, they are primarily intracellular pathogens, and plasma means resembling plasmodium. Now, usually when we describe histoplasmosis, there are 3 different species of histoplasma that are usually associated with this infection. One is called as the histoplasma capsulatum, causing the classical variety of histoplasmosis. Histoplasma duboisi causes the African histoplasmosis, and histoplasma farciminosum causes epizootic histoplasmosis. Epi means epidemic, zoo means animals. So, this species, histoplasma farciminosum, primarily causes infections in the animals. So, therefore, I will not be discussing more about this particular species of histoplasma. So, let us concentrate on histoplasma capsulatum, the variety which causes classical histoplasmosis, and histoplasma duboisi, which causes African histoplasmosis. So usually histoplasma capsulatum or histoplasma infections in general terms is usually seen initially in the Ohio and Mississippi river valleys, along the river banks in the Ohio and Mississippi river valleys in the USA. Now when I say USA, please don't be misled by the fact that this is particularly localized only in USA. We also see the same infection in India along the banks of the rivers Ganga or Yamuna. The reason why this particular infection is usually seen along the river banks is that along the river banks usually the soil is humid, and there are plenty of bird droppings, pigeon droppings, or bat or iguana droppings, and most of these bird droppings are rich in nitrogen. This particular organism has selected this niche to survive because of the presence of rich nitrogen content in the bird droppings and also in the soil. Now histoplasma, as I said, is usually caused in the histiocytes. Okay, it is usually seen in the histiocytes, that is within the reticuloendothelial system. So this particular infection is primarily localized to the reticuloendothelial system and it resembles plasma. Now it was called capsulatum because initially when the Giemsa or Wright stain preparations of this fungus was made, a pale blue ring which signified the fungal cell wall was surrounding a darker blue cytoplasm. This pale blue ring, this cytoplasm was seen retracting from the cell wall, often giving the false appearance of a capsule. The chromatin usually stained dark violet and appears as a crescent-shaped mass within the cell. So initially, when this fungi was observed, this pale blue ring was thought to be a capsule, but later on we now know that it is nothing but the fungal cell wall. The same halo or a pseudocapsule will also be seen with a HND stain. But when you stain this organism with GMS or a PAS stain, that is Gomori methenamine silver or periodic acid shift stain, the staining appears uniform, the organism appears uniformly stained and there is no pseudocapsule at all. Okay, so that's why I just wanted to highlight the importance of this term capsulatum, because initially what we thought of this organism as a capsule is not a capsule but a pseudocapsule. However, the name capsulatum is still retained as a species name with this organism. So primarily this particular infection, as I already mentioned, is acquired by inhalation of the spores. Once the spores enter the lungs, they travel to the alveolar spaces. Now the person is an immunocompetent individual. The macrophages present within the alveolar spaces will trap this organism and it will effectively contain this organism within the alveolar spaces. But whenever the person gets immunocompromised, the reactivation of the lesions occur, whereby the spores are transported through the lymphatics and they enter the bloodstream and disseminate to the entire body. Clinically, this particular infection causes pulmonary lesions, and secondary to the pulmonary infections, you have various manifestations in the other organ systems like the skin, brain, in the gastrointestinal tract, and also in the eye. One thing that we should note when we understand the clinical presentations of histoplasmosis is that in most of the Indian patients we usually see oral lesions. So therefore, the reason why I mentioned about these oral lesions is that usually we do not look at the mouth of the patient, and especially this particular fact is usually overlooked, and we miss certain oral lesions. So therefore, when we are dealing with a patient with systemic symptoms, or if with a multi-systemic involvement, we should always make it a point to even examine the oral cavity and look for certain oral lesions, because in histoplasmosis most of the Indian patients manifest with oral lesions. The oral lesions appear as nodulo-ulcerative lesions on the buccal mucosa, lips, gingiva, and palate. So therefore it is very important for us to collect these samples, aspirate these oral lesions, and send these samples or biopsy the samples and to be sent to the lab. Now, the pulmonary manifestation is usually seen in the form of hemoptysis, the non-specific symptoms, and usually the symptoms, along with these symptoms like cough and hemoptysis, the patient will also be having some X-ray features of consolidation with hilar lymphadenopathy. Usually the pulmonary infection can be an acute benign infection, or it can be a chronic progressive infection. The localized infections usually is seen primarily in the reticuloendothelial system, and it can also involve various other tissues and organ systems of the body, especially in the immunocompromised with impaired cellular immunity. Now, usual tissue reaction that is seen in the pulmonary infection is that of a granulomatous type. Now again, there is a reason why I specifically highlight this tissue reaction, is because most of your systemic fungal infections will have either a granulomatous reaction or a suppurative reaction. In the case of histoplasmosis, it is the granulomatous reaction which predominates, and this granulomatous reaction usually is seen in the form of the presence of macrophages, lymphocytes, epithelioid cells, and giant cells, and almost resembles tuberculosis. So therefore, tuberculosis becomes an important differential diagnosis when we biopsy the lung tissues, and before we come to a conclusion or narrow the diagnosis to histoplasma capsulatum. Just like in tuberculosis, there are the granulomatous reaction is seen even in histoplasmosis, but the only way to differentiate both these conditions is that in histoplasmosis you will have calcification along with the fibrosis. Otherwise, even caseation necrosis can be seen in this infection. There is a term called as histoplasmoma, which is associated with this tissue reaction, which is nothing but a concentric layer of collagen and enlarging fibrous mass which is seen around a primarily healed focus. So primarily you see a granulomatous tissue reaction. Skin manifestations are seen in the form of petechiae and ecchymosis on the abdominal wall and the thorax. Disseminated infections are seen in the brain, in the gastrointestinal tract, and in chronic cases there are certain spots called as histospots which can be seen in the eye. So for diagnosing histoplasmosis, we have to ensure that the appropriate samples like sputum, bone marrow, lymph node or peripheral blood smear, depending on the manifestations of the patient, it has to be sent. Please remember that these samples collected for a systemic fungal infection has to be sent to both the pathology lab and also to the mycology lab. When you send the samples to the pathology lab, you have to send the tissue samples in formalin, but when you are sending it to the mycology lab, please remember not to formalinize the tissue samples. If you are sending the tissue samples, it has to be immersed in a sterile saline solution and has to be transported to the lab appropriately, because once we see the classical tissue reactions in the biopsy, we also need to demonstrate the yeast phase and also the mold phase in all the dimorphic fungal infections. So if you look at the colonies on Sabouraud's dextrose agar, they are usually seen as white to buff brown colonies with aerial hyphae. And if you look at the mold phase, you can see two types of conidia, the macroconidia and the microconidia. Usually the macroconidia which are seen in histoplasma are called as the tuberculate macroconidia because of the presence of the knobby or short cylindrical projections that are seen at the in the wall of the conidia. So microconidia are also seen, usually spiny, and they are usually seen on short branches or directly on the sides of the hyphae. So this particular identification is very important because tuberculate macroconidia is rarely seen in only very few of the fungal infections. Now if you look at the yeast form, the yeast forms are usually seen as small ovoid narrow based budding yeast cells. Please note the term narrow based because there are certain other fungal infections whose yeast forms appear as broad based budding yeast cells. Okay, for example, cryptococcosis. Okay, now this particular yeast form of the fungi at 37, which is usually grown at 37 degrees Celsius, is confused with the other commonly occurring fungi like cryptococcosis or Cryptococcus neoformans or even your Candida glabrata. Both the yeast forms of Cryptococcus and Candida glabrata closely resemble the yeast forms of histoplasma, but we need to remember that the yeast cells of Candida glabrata usually generate a suppurative tissue reaction and not a granulomatous tissue reaction, and also they stain better with HND and do not demonstrate a pseudocapsule. Similarly, for the Cryptococcus, usually they have a dark wall and which are rounded and consistently appear in a large variety of sizes. They can be typically, the capsular material can also be typically demonstrated in the negative staining techniques like Indiane staining. Okay, along with that, we should also remember that there are certain protozoans like Leishmania donovanae. Usually they are also associated with infections of the reticuloendothelial system, especially the amastigote form of the Leishmania closely resemble the Histoplasma capsulatum yeast forms. So we usually differentiate it from the histoplasma, in that usually the amastigote forms do not bud and they cannot be stained with fungal stains, and in addition these amastigote forms have got certain structures which are called as kinetoplast, which is not seen with histoplasma capsulatum. Okay, so this is the yeast form and the mold form of histoplasma. Remember, tuberculate macroconidia can also be seen with other fungi like Cepidonium or Renispora. That is why I always emphasize this fact that whenever we demonstrate a dimorphic fungi, we should always ensure that we isolate both the yeast forms and the mold forms in culture. Otherwise, these fungi may not actually be the dimorphic fungi and may be some others closely resembling fungi. So the next infection that we usually talk of in systemic mycosis is blastomycosis. This particular infection is also called as the North American blastomycosis because it is usually seen in the Northern American region. So that's why we usually called it as North American blastomycosis. Now, North American blastomycosis is caused by the fungi Blastomyces dermatitidis. Okay, Blastomyces dermatitidis is the usual infection that is seen, and in older patients, in older lesions rather, you see more of granulomas, but which may contain central abscesses and or caseation. But in the initial infection, in younger lesions, neutrophils predominate and you see a suppurative reaction. So therefore, typically you see both acute or in chronic cases you see a pyogranulomatous lesions in the tissues. The primary site of lesion is again in the lungs, and secondary infections or disseminated infections are usually caused in the bone, skin and the genitourinary system. Now, out of these three secondary sites, we need to remember that this particular infection causes more of skin lesions, and that is why it is called as dermatitidis. Okay, in the bone, usually we notice osteomyelitis type of features, and in the X-ray we usually see a moth-eaten appearance with vigorous periosteal reactions. In the skin, we can notice papillopustular heaped up lesions. In fact, the skin lesions gradually progress from becoming a papule, then they become a nodule, and some fluid gets filled into these nodules and they become a vesicle. This vesicle enlarges and it tends to rupture, and once this vesicle rupture, the fluid is discharged, which is usually foul smelling, and after the fluid gets discharged, then it leaves a barren area, okay, in the form of an ulcer, or sometimes even a fistula can also be seen. Oral lesions are seen resembling actinomycosis. So that is about blastomycosis. Depending on the manifestations of the individual, usually we collect the sample like sputum, bronchoalveolar lavage, abscess, pus or biopsies can be done. Please, I will not reiterate this. You have to send the samples to both the pathology and the microbiology lab. in the microbiology lab we need to demonstrate yeast to mold conversion definitively to identify this as a dimorphic fungi. Similarly, in pathology we require to see the tissue reaction. So on the H&E staining, as you can see in this particular slide, you can note typically double contoured, thick walled, multi-nucleated yeast cells with broad based budding. Okay, so that is why I mentioned about narrow based budding in histoplasma, because in blastomyces dermatitis the yeast forms will typically have a broad base budding cells, and the bud characteristically grows to the same size as the parent cell before they detach. So the colonies usually appear downy or fluffy white to tan on the Sabroud's dextrose agar. And one more point is the enriched medium like the brain heart infusion agar can also be used to diagnose the systemic mycosis. So if you see the mold form, usually the mold form is classically described as a lollipop appearance. So here you can see the mold form. You can see septate hyphae which are and along these septate hyphae you can see short conidiophore arising from these hyphae, and at the end of the short conidiophore you can see pear shaped conidia, and that's why we call it as a lollipop appearance. This particular appearance, the mold form, usually resembles other fungi like Scedosporium species or Chrysosporium species. So therefore we need to definitively demonstrate the yeast cells with broad based budding as far as blastomyces is concerned. Now we slowly move on to the next systemic fungal infection, which is paracoccidioidomycosis, also called as the South American blastomycosis, again predominantly because it is localized to the South American continents, especially Brazil. So any football fans out there, you can also remember Brazil is one of the continents or one of the regions which are endemic for paracoccidioidomycosis. So this particular fungal infection is caused by the fungus Paracoccidoides brasiliensis. Okay, Paracoccidoides brasiliensis. It is classically you will see a triad of pulmonary lesions, skin lesions, and the buccal lesions. So patients presenting with paracoccidioidomycosis have a pulmonary lesion, skin lesion, and also buccal lesion in the form of granulomas, usually seen at the edge of the oral cavity. So the tissue reaction is basically granulomatous in nature. It can be seen in the acute form, subacute form, or in the chronic form. As always, primary lesions are seen in the lungs. The pulmonary infections, in the pulmonary infections, you will see predominantly neutrophilic abscesses in one area of the tissue, and in another area of the tissues you will have granulomatous reaction. Fibrosis is also seen. Calcification can also occur. Okay, in mucocutaneous lesions, ulceration and pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia may be seen. The disseminated infections are usually noticed in the skin, lymph nodes, and other internal organs. Orally, we will see lesions in the periodontal tissues and also papilloulcerative lesions in the mucosa. So again, depending on the site of infection, we collect the appropriate specimen like sputum, bronchoalveolar lavage, CSF, crust from granuloma. Now if you do a Gomori methenamine silver staining, we will see the yeast form of this organism, which appears as a multipolar budding cells. So you can see here there is budding from all the directions of the cells, and this multipolar budding yeast cell often resembles a mariner's wheel that is usually seen in the ship. So therefore it is also called as a pilot wheel appearance or a mariner's wheel appearance. If you take a cross section at this particular point, you will see that it appears like a Mickey Mouse. So therefore this particular appearance of the multipolar budding yeast cells is called as the pilot wheel appearance or mariner's wheel appearance or even Mickey Mouse appearance. So on Saprote's dextrose agar, usually we see yeast-like colonies initially, which is soft and off-white to cream colored. Later on they become wrinkled and they appear rough or pasty in appearance. The mold forms are usually seen as septate branched hyphae with some intercalary or terminal chlamydospores. Okay, so that is the usual appearance of the yeast form. And the next infection and the last infection of the systemic mycosis is the coccidioidomycosis. This particular infection is caused by the fungi Coccidioides immitis. Im means not, mitis means mild. So please understand that this particular infection is not a mild infection. Initially, until 2012, this particular pathogen was classified as one of the bioterror agents, but after 2012 it has been removed from the list. However, we have to handle this particular fungal infection with the fungal species with utmost care in the lab. The primary lesions are usually seen in the lung, and the fatal skin granulomas are usually the cause of disfigurement and the death of the patient. The reaction is basically granulomatous reaction, and orally you see proliferative granulomas and ulcerating skin lesions. This particular infection is usually seen in the arid and the semi-arid regions, and this is how a patient in the terminal stage of the infection looks like, with fatal skin granulomas. Now if you look at the pulmonary progression of this infection, we will see that only about 40% of the patients will have a flu-like syndrome. Most of them are asymptomatic. Out of this 40, 8% of the individuals progress to develop pneumonia with cavitation along with pericarditis, and out of this 8%, 4% become asymptomatic later, but 4% progress to chronic stage where thorax can be involved, and out of this 3%, 1 to 3.5% of the chronic patients, progressive infection is developed in again 0.5 to 1% of individuals, with disseminated manifestations both in the meninges and in the lungs in the form of miliary appearance. So if you look at the culture, we will notice that on doing the stain, Gomori methenamine silver or periodic acid shift stain, we will see characteristic spherules within the tissues, and these spherules are surrounded by the granulomatous reaction. So I'll show this spherules once again with much more clearer. In the GMS stain, you can see the spherules surrounded by the granulomatous reaction, and inside the spherules you will see a lot of endospores, and this is coccidioidomycosis by nature is usually, it can be an acute self-limiting respiratory illness or can be a chronic malignant infection. Now if you look at the yeast phase characteristically we can see septate branched hyphae with thick walled barrel shaped arthroconidea. So this particular forms that you are seeing, this rectangular cells, okay, these are called as arthroconidea. And what we need to remember here is the arthroconidea are barrel shaped and they are usually alternating in nature. So you see an alternate arthroconidea, and in between these two arthroconidea we see certain empty cells. These empty cells are called as disjunctor cells, and the walls of the empty cells break and are characteristically present on either side of the freed arthroconidea. In young colonies, racket hyphae can be formed, and it can serve as a sign of development of arthroconidea. Usually in Sabroud's dextrose agar, we can see suit-like greyish white to tan colonies within 4 to 5 days. Now, why I specifically mentioned about arthroconidea is that this arthroconidea can also resemble other fungi like Malbranchia species. Malbranchia also has got a alternating arthroconidea, but this particular fungal species is not pathogenic. Okay. Similarly, other fungi like Cytiladium dimidiatum, okay, Neocytiladium dimidiatum, this is the new name. Previously it was called Cytiladium dimidiatum, also has got arthroconidea. This particular fungi causes onychomycosis or the fungal nail infection. Arthroconidea can also be seen with Trichosporon and Geotrichum. In Trichosporon, along with arthroconidea, sometimes you can see blastoconidia also, that is not seen with coccidioides. So that is a differentiating point. And again in Geotrichum we can also see arthroconidea. So this in a nutshell completes systemic mycosis. So basically this group of fungal infections, to summarize, are caused by dimorphic fungi, and you can see we have to demonstrate the conversion from the yeast phase to the mold phase. And if you look at the treatment of the dimorphic fungal infection, all of these infections are primarily treated with either amphotericin B or itraconazole. Okay, itraconazole is a broad spectrum azole. It can be treated with itraconazole, or in immunocompromised individuals usually we go for liposomal amphotericin B. And whenever we suspect dimorphic fungal infection, please do not forget to examine the oral cavity of the patient, because in the absence of all the other features, the oral lesions may be the only clue for diagnosing these group of infections. Another thing is that slide culture should never be performed during the lab diagnosis of systemic fungal infections, and when you send tissue samples or any samples for that matter suspecting a dimorphic fungal infection, always send for both the biopsy in formalin and to the mycology lab immersed in the saline. So a high index of suspicion is always the hallmark of diagnosis of dimorphic fungal infections. And even though these fungal infections have been described in the Indian subcontinent, most of them have been underreported or misdiagnosed. So therefore students, please remember that dimorphic fungal infections form, or the systemic fungal infections form a very important diagnostic consideration, especially in the chronic patients with long-standing multi-system involvement and who are immunocompromised. Thank you.